You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important and very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And as I do on every show, I thank all of you. And I thank all of you because our listeners are growing each and every day. We grow organically because of you sharing individual podcasts or the entire show with friends or family. Many of you listen to the show on your phones, on iTunes, on Google Podcasts. It used to be called iTunes, I guess. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all different stations. We're on them all. So thank you again for that. And again, I know why where listeners are growing and why you share the shows with people, because we got great guests, very knowledgeable and informative, and we're not going to disappoint you today. We have with us Katie Chris. Katie is a board certified and mobile, which we'll learn more about, audiologist, licensed to practice in North Carolina and South Carolina. She has been pursuing audiology since she was 16. Wow. Katie graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Communication Sciences and Disorders, and later graduated with her doctorate in audiology. Katie, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today.
Thank you so much for having me, Frank.
Yeah, this is an important subject matter in a lot of ways, and we're going to get into that and throughout the course of our discussion here. But since 16, so how did you get interested at such a young age?
Yeah, so I did a camp in my high school called Camp Med my junior year, and I got paired with an audiologist. So essentially during that program, you were paired with different careers within the medical field to see what you were interested in. And I just fell in love with the art and the technology and audiology. So I decided that's what I wanted to do. I was very fortunate to learn that at 16. So I went to Appalachian State and got my bachelor's in science. And then after that, I went right to East Tennessee State and got my AUD.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's great. That's wonderful. So let's talk about, hearing loss, hearing aids. There's been a stigma, I think, for many years. I don't know if it's changed. You'll let us know. But a stigma kind of against hearing aids. Talk to us about that and what's happened over time, and is there a huge stigma today that there was maybe years ago?
I will say that the stigma for hearing aids is improving somewhat, but I will say that on average, it takes someone with hearing loss 7 to 10 years to actually get hearing aids. If you think about it, we don't perceive getting eyeglasses that way. And a big part of that is because people feel like if I'm getting hearing aids, I'm admitting to quote unquote getting older. That's not necessarily the case. I have patients of all ages, and they don't necessarily have to be older adults, but of the 71% of those 71 years and older who could benefit from hearing aids, believe it or not, fewer than 1 in 3 have ever used them, according to the National Council on Aging, which is a pretty big deal. So that just says that there are a lot of people out there that could benefit from hearing aids and haven't gotten them, whether that be the stigma of I am getting older, or I have family and friends that have tried hearing aids and don't like them, or I just don't think I need them. There's a denial component in there as well. But when we're talking about the stigma and how technology has changed, in the past, we've just had those big, bulky hearing aids that you can hear whistling from, down the rows in church. And if you hug someone that's wearing them, they just whistle. That's not the case now. Hearing aids are a lot more discreet. They're a lot more inconspicuous. They can do a lot more than what they used to be able to do, such as rechargeability, Bluetooth connectivity, Some hearing aids even have fall alert in them. So the technology itself is, of course, evolving, as all technology is. But my hopes is that the stigma against hearing aids is continuing to get better. And I believe that we can only do that by educating people and providing them with the facts. And the truth is that some people really do need hearing aids, and it greatly impacts their quality of life, which I know we'll get into. But the stigma itself is just really, it can be a couple things. Denial, as I said, that stigma of feeling older, that feeling that it's just not going to work for them. There are a couple things, and it just kind of depends on the specific individual as to why they might not want to be pursuing that amplification.
If you just walk down the street, all right. I mean, if you're in a major city like New York City, or I'm up in Northern California, it's not as congested here. But even if you walk down the street here, I would say that, I don't want to say majority, but maybe majority of the people have some sort of earpods, whatever the name is, because they're listening to something on their phone. They're listening to music, or they just leave it in because they don't want to miss a phone call, right? Or they don't want to get an alert that they just got a text. I mean, that's just what we live in today. So I'm talking younger people that have things coming out of their ears all the time. So hearing aids, tell me if I'm wrong, I mean, almost replaces that. I mean, you could have your hearing aids and they become kind of your AirPod or whatever you want to call it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So depending on the style, the hearing aid itself has to be Bluetooth compatible.
Right.
Your audiologist can certainly guide you whenever it comes to, if that's something you're interested in, choosing a style that is indeed Bluetooth compatible with your specific phone. But essentially, yeah, you're correct. You don't really need the AirPods or the headphones anymore. The hearing aids are both amplification and that streaming device in one. So you are able to have your hearing aids in and also listen to your favorite podcast or music while on your walk, streaming through those
That's
same
right. You
devices.
can listen to Boomers Today, right?
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. So untreated hearing loss, let's talk about that, because that can be pretty serious.
It
Talk to us,
can.
talk to us about some of the areas that are people should be aware of and concerning to you in your position for untreated hearing loss.
Yeah, so just some of what could be is, even if you have a mild hearing loss, it can triple your chances of actually resulting in a fall. You can fall even with a mild hearing loss. With smoking, you have a 70% greater chance of having a hearing loss. With diabetes, you're 2 times more likely. And the biggest thing that we're really talking about now is cognition and hearing loss. It's been greatly studied throughout time that hearing loss and cognition are greatly correlated. While there are the numerous comorbidities that come along with it, some that I mentioned, cognition is the one that is most discussed. There have been multiple studies that have come out even back to the 80s. But the newest one and the most talked about now within the field is the ACHIEVE study that came out in the Lancet in last year in 2003. And essentially they found that hearing intervention reduces cognitive change by 48% over 3 years. And this was actually recently supported by the ENHANCE study that just came out in Australia in January of this year, 2024. But whenever we're thinking about the studies behind cognition, even Mulrow back in 1990 found that hearing loss is associated with adverse effects on our quality of life, and that those effects are reversible with hearing aids if you're wearing them consistently. So dementia plays a role in that cognition as well. The Lancet has determined hearing loss as the most modifiable risk factor when it comes to dementia. That is ahead of TBIs and hypertension. Something else, whenever it comes to hearing loss, that it can be greatly impacted is social isolation. And that's actually something that really drew me to audiology. there's this kind of progression of untreated hearing loss where people have their own way of coping with it. They will either ask for repetition, play along with what is being said, or they just begin to isolate themselves. They socially withdraw. And untreated hearing loss can increase the risk of depression by 40%. And that social isolation, believe it or not, that's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So we're talking about a lot of things that impact our overall health when we are considering our hearing health. And that's something that's just now being discussed, but is important for people to know.
Well, one of the biggest challenges of aging people is loneliness, right? I mean, it's a big problem. And that's kind of another word, I guess, for social isolation, right?
Yeah, so essentially social isolation is quantifiable. It can be measured. Whereas loneliness is more of a feeling. We aren't able to measure it.
Right.
But yes, the loneliness and social isolation is considered a public health crisis at this point. About 40 to 50% of those 80 or older do report some loneliness. Yeah. And that can be heightened due to, increases in impairments as we get older, decreased economic resources, deaths of family and loved ones around us as we get older. So there are a couple things that play a role in social isolation when it comes to hearing loss.
Yeah, so I want to go back to something you said, just maybe if you could expound upon it, falls. You said that increase of falls. Explain that a little more, how that could happen with hearing loss.
Yeah, so the reason why that is depending on your degree of hearing loss, you might not be aware of your surroundings. And then there's also, this theory behind just cognition in general, the two theories behind what causes our hearing loss and what causes our that correlation between cognitive decline. So one of those that can play a role in falls is the cascade hypothesis. That neuroplasticity, you lose it, you use it, or you lose it. You're lacking that sensory input, and that's directly impacting your brain structure. And with our cognitive load theory as well, this is really more so correlated to the falls. Our brains just have that limited number of resources. So if you have a hearing loss and you are trying to focus on your auditory processing and other things, such as your balance, your footing, your memory, you're not having that much of a cognitive load on that side. It's more so on that auditory processing where your brain isn't able to focus on your somatosensory input, your footing. Everything is really loaded onto that auditory processing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Katie, we're going to take a real quick break, I promise, just to recognize our sponsor. We come back, certainly want to continue the discussion, and we're going to hit upon a subject matter I want to personally hear a little bit more about, and I'm sure called tinnitus, right? That's how you pronounce it, tinnitus?
Tinnitus, tinnitus, tomato.
Yeah, that's right. You got it. So we're gonna give me 30 seconds. I promise we'll be back and we'll continue our conversation. Okay. All right. So do you know anyone who may be concerned about an older driver? Well, Senior Care Authority's Beyond Driving with Dignity program is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, you could go to www.beyonddrivingwithdignity.com or call 877-907-8841 to connect with a senior care authority advisor in your area. So we are back with Katie Chris. Katie is a board certified mobile audiologist. And so Katie, I didn't even ask you this, maybe before we get on to a few other things. You're a mobile audiologist. So talk to us about that.
I am. So I am mobile, meaning that essentially any service that we provide in the office, I can provide on site in a patient's home. So for those patients that have difficulty finding transportation, might have an injury and don't feel safe getting out of the home, or just really prefer that concierge care, I'm your gal when you're in the North Carolina, South Carolina region. I go out to you. I can perform a hearing test. I can remove cerumen, that's earwax. I can program hearing aids. I can provide real ear verification to hearing aids. I'm able to do it all on site, which has been a really great experience, and patients are loving it so far.
Great, great. So I know we have a lot of listeners in South Carolina and North Carolina, but we also have listeners throughout the country. So any recommendations do you have for our listeners who say, how do I get to the right person? How do I find Katie in my area? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so honestly, Google. You can easily look up, find an audiologist or find a mobile audiologist. Mobile audiology is fairly new, so there aren't as many across the region, but there are certainly audiologists out there that are happy to help. You can just look up find an audiologist near me and look at the reviews, look at the patient testimonials, and do your research in the care and the services that practice provides.
Great. And what is the website of the practice that you're with?
Yes, so I am with Audiology and Hearing Services of Charlotte. Our website is audiologycharlotte.com. You can schedule appointments on there. We have a lot of great resources if you want to check us out.
Wonderful. Good. So can we talk, unless there's anything else you want to continue with on the cognition or anything like that we were talking about before, anything you wanted to add to that discussion?
Not necessarily, no. I think that one of the things, though, when it comes to cognition and hearing loss is really just try to be aware and try to kind of monitor where you're at in regards to your listening and understanding. Hearing loss is gradual. So, if you have that family or friend that says, hey, maybe it's not a bad idea that you get your hearing tested, or you are listening to that TV or that podcast a little too loud, go get a baseline hearing test. That's really the best advice I can give when it comes to just taking care of yourself and your hearing health.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's talk about tinnitus. So the reason I want to talk about that, actually my wife has it, and it's horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I realize because of that, in discussions we've had with so many people say, oh, I have it too. And I have it too. And, it's not something you just bring up to somebody. I have tinnitus. All right. But I'm realizing just in our own circle of friends and family, how many people have it. It's just kind of blows me away. But talk to us about tinnitus, what it is, and anything you can add to it, and how hearing aids maybe could even help the situation.
Yeah, so tinnitus is essentially this acoustic sensation that's in your head. There's no external sound. No one else can hear it, but it's just in your head. It can be a ringing. It's typically called ringing of the ears, but it can also be a roaring, a buzzing, a hissing. I've heard water dripping. I've heard katydids. It can have different type of tonal qualities. There could be different causes for tinnitus, but it could be secondary to inner ear damage. It can, depending on the severity, it can really impact your concentration, your sleep. So what I'll hear from patients is, I notice it most in the morning and at night. that's because your mind isn't focused on anything else. It's just focused on that sound in your head. So it can range in severity. For some people, it's bothersome. For some people, it isn't. But I will say that when it comes to tinnitus and hearing aids can provide some tinnitus alleviation. I'll never say will, it can. Essentially, there is no cure for tinnitus. There's no surgical alternative. There's no magic pill you can take. The only real cure is habituating to it. And actually, at our practice, we do have tinnitus management. So we do work with you on understanding your tinnitus and habituating to it to where it doesn't impact your life as greatly.
Got it. So if you're hearing it happens more in the morning and more in the evening when things are quieted down, and people complaining when they go to bed, I mean, the likelihood is that people take their hearing aids off at night when they go to bed.
That's very true.
Yeah. So really, obviously they still got to deal with it at that time of the evening.
And an analogy that I really liked when I was in grad school learning about tinnitus was, think about an empty room with just a candle lit in it, and that's your tinnitus. If you don't have anything else distracting your brain, you're just focused on that.
Right.
But then put everything else back in that room, and you're not as focused on that candle. So whenever you are trying to not focus on your tinnitus, say you are going to sleep and you're noticing it, then try to sleep with a fan, a noise generator, a TV to really mask out that tinnitus, and essentially try to just not distract you from falling asleep, concentrating, what have you.
Okay, great. So talk to us about kind of the mental and psychological impacts of untreated hearing loss. I know there's a lot of studies on that, so maybe you could share some information on that for our listeners.
Yeah, so the mental and psychological impacts on hearing loss, again, that's something that really guided me towards audiology. Essentially, as I mentioned, it can really result in that social isolation and depression. It can also just result in frustration and fatigue from not only the person perceiving the hearing loss, but those around them. They might start to feel dismissive, just tense about the whole situation, avoidant of those situations that involve communication. And all of those feelings can lead to those negative mental insights on life. So yes, the hearing loss and the hearing loss and the mental aspect on it is just huge. People can just start to feel alone when they start having that difficulty communicating. And again, that just results in that kind of vicious cycle of wanting to withdraw and isolate themselves.
So at what point, do you recommend that somebody goes in to get checked? I mean, again, it might be a family member. I kind of was kidding with you. Well, I wasn't kidding. I was joking around, but my kids would come to visit and they go, "Dad, why is the TV so loud?" And I'm going, "It doesn't seem loud to me." Okay. So what guidance can you give the individual? All right,
Yes.
to say, hey, if this is happening to you, it's really time to go in.
Yeah. So again, hearing loss is gradual. Depending on where the region is that you have your hearing loss, you're missing out on some speech. You could be missing out on some speech consonants. So that's when your hearing should really be evaluated. If you're noticing that you're having difficulty understanding people, you're requiring repetition pretty frequently, you're perceiving other people to mumble. Number one complaint I'll hear is understanding and background noise. There's a difference between hearing and understanding. So you might be able to hear someone in that noisy restaurant or in that large group, but you can't necessarily understand them.
Right.
I'll also hear, small children. For those that have grandkids that are younger, they might have a harder time understanding them. If you feel tired or fatigued after listening for too long, that's something called listening fatigue, and it is real. It's mostly been studied in children who go to school and have hearing loss, but it's real for all of us that have hearing loss and aren't being aided. You can just feel that listening fatigue. We talked about tinnitus. Tinnitus can be a precursor for hearing loss. And yes, if you are, I'm sorry, Frank, but if you are told that your TV is too loud or your music, your radio.
I get it. I know. I have my appointment scheduled.
Just get that baseline hearing test. There's nothing wrong with just going in and just getting an idea of what your hearing's like. You can certainly do that. And that's definitely recommended if you're 60 years old or older. Get that baseline hearing test just so you have an idea of how you're hearing so that you can track it throughout the years.
So with the time we have left, which isn't a lot, but I like, we started talking about this, hearing aid and technology, but talk to us a little bit how things have evolved. And now there's over-the-counter hearing aids, but talk to us about that and when maybe the over-the-counter could work fine for some people, but maybe not others, and just how everything has evolved.
Yeah, so whenever we're talking about over-the-counter, that's really for people that perceive themselves to have a mild to moderate hearing loss. So again, how do you know if that's what you have? Get your hearing evaluated and see. If you are within the parameters of an over-the-counter hearing aid, that's certainly your choice if that's something you want to pursue. In regards to technology in general, there's a difference between hearing aid technologies in regards to assistance in background noise, the numbers of channels and bands that can be on the hearing aids. That's where the difference in technology levels lies. So with that, it allows the audiologist to make a certain amount of programming adjustments across the frequency range, depending on the level of technology. Hearing aid manufacturers are really listening when it comes to the patient's complaint of understanding and noise. They are really working on filtering out that noise, creating technology that makes that communication more seamless. Hearing aids also have a more natural sound quality now. No one wants to wear anything that just makes life sound mechanical, like everyone's a robot. So hearing aids also have a more natural sound quality. Something great about hearing aids now too is depending on where you are, they can be programmed virtually. So we can do telehealth appointments where if you're having issues with your hearing aids, we can program them virtually. You don't actually have to come into the office, which again is great for those that don't want to get out or can't. So the technology is just getting better and better. Whenever it comes to wind block, so many things, it's constantly evolving. I mean, not even every couple of years, it's more so every year. So just staying top of it on it and being aware of what's out there is the best you can do. Great.
Katie, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers today. I really appreciate it. And check her out at audiologycharlotte.com. Katie, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and everybody, please be safe out there. Talk to everybody
You've been
next
listening
week.
to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.